to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Tristan, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy to have
Thank you, Guillaume. Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Let's jump straight into it. What's the story, Tristan? What got you into the fantastic, yet sometimes stressful world of consulting?
I did not do it on purpose. It was mostly by request. I was approached initially to consult on an accelerator project funded by the government of Mexico early on, kind of before there were accelerators around every street corner. And they had watched me kind of publicly blog and explained how I was creating a startup in Silicon Valley, and they liked my approach and kind of honesty and tactics about it. And they said, okay, maybe this person can help us apply similar tactics in Mexico. So that was actually my first consulting gig, was by request. And after that, kind of things just spiraled a little bit out of my control. Every time I finished a gig, there was another person who said, well, would you help us build this accelerator program in Vietnam, in Belgium? And eventually working for a company called Luxor, which also worked for accelerator programs. And then eventually the corporate world deciding that they needed to copy what startups were doing and be able to compete with these small, fast-moving companies coming out of Silicon Valley. And so corporations started to approach myself and colleagues like myself, and eventually the government. So it was very much not intentional, I have to say. So from a business standpoint, it was not explicit. It was reacting to customer demand.
That's a very interesting one, because I think there is a lot to learn here. How did you say they found you in the first place? It was a piece of article that you've written on a blog?
Yeah, so when I first moved to Silicon Valley, which was like 16 years ago or something like that, I was not really very familiar with the tech industry. I had worked at an IT security company for 5 years, so I was familiar with technology and relatively up to date on that. But the culture of Silicon Valley is relatively unique. At least at that time, was very unique in how open it was. And so when I arrived there, I started looking around and asking for advice and looking for how people were approaching developing technology products, developing new companies. And I was referred to a number of different blogs and books and articles like those by Steve Blank and Eric Ries. And one of the things that struck me is how open people were about what they were doing and how they were approaching their startups, how they were designing experiments, running their company and building things. They were doing a lot of things very much in the open. And so I thought that was normal, and started to do the same when I worked on my first kind of tech startup there. And so we blogged about every single thing that we were doing. If we were running an A/B test, we would announce the results of the A/B test. If we were doing usability studies, we would announce how we were doing usability studies, how we were even faking website design with Photoshop and kind of sleight of hand. So I think being very open and transparent about our approach and how we were doing things was what attracted a lot of people to me initially, and actually to our company in general. I mean, after I officially started my company in 2013, and we have always had the policy and approach of being extremely transparent, and that fits very well with my ethos. I'm from New York City, where I'm sitting in Brooklyn right now, and we do like to tell it how it is. And I think that there is something that is very appealing to people. Consulting is a trust-based business. You have to trust the person that you're working with. And there are kind of too many people out there, particularly these days, who are just I don't know what the policy is on this podcast, but BSing their way to try and get a gig without really understanding things or without being willing to admit what you know and what you don't know. And I think that's not a very good policy. It's not a very good approach in life in general. And I think honesty and transparency can really win you a lot of admirers.
It's the long-term play, but in my opinion, that's the only one.
Yeah.
Especially in the day and age where anybody can claim anything on internet now. LinkedIn is full of very strong experts. I don't know if you've noticed as well, Tristan. So I couldn't agree more with you. And that's one of the things that we try to push is like 2026 authenticity and like showing your true self will win as long as the fundamentals of consulting are still here, which is authority, you've named it, trust, super important, relationship, and having the right conversation at the right time with the right person. If you have those fundamentals and then you show up in an authentic way, you grow your business. It's as simple as that. What's the problem that you solve now, Tristan? What would you say is the thing that you help your clients achieve?
Right now, our team has been very focused in the past about 4 years on how to predict the unpredictable, how to predict the impacts from any given innovation project, whether that's gains from productivity or revenue or lives saved or tons of carbon taken out of the air. When you have a very, very early stage project, which is maybe just an idea on a napkin, how can you potentially predict what the potential outcomes might be? Because it's usually, could be $1 billion or it could be zero. So we've been very, very focused on that for the past 4 years because it's become a critical question for a lot of companies. A lot of companies know that they need to innovate. They know they need to build something for the future. But they have a tough time justifying it, particularly in this economic climate where we've just come out of COVID and political chaos and supply chain problems and tariffs now. So it's an area of extreme uncertainty, and being able to navigate that with some hard numbers, or rather some very fuzzy numbers, some intentionally fuzzy numbers, is kind of the area we've been specializing in recently.
Who do you solve that for? Who's the main target of this?
The main target audience for this is usually C-level or kind of pseudo C-level. If it's a business unit that might have a different title, it might be a VP in charge of a business unit or a business unit manager. They need to make decisions on a portfolio of investments. And a large company might have a dozen innovation projects. You might have 100 innovation projects. You might have more than that. And you need to decide where to allocate your resources. So if you are just given a projection from all those individual projects, and says this one says they'll earn $10 million, and this one says they'll earn $100 million, and this one says they'll earn $50 million. But you know for a fact that all of those projections are wrong, because historically they've always been wrong. Then you need something else to make a decision, right? So we've focused on treating innovation projects more like poker hands, and start talking about the odds of success. What are the odds of pulling a straight flush? What are the odds of getting through the kind? And so we help quantify those instead of just giving a fixed number of this project will definitely earn 100 million, when it, again, almost always those projections are wrong. 80% of public company projections on their revenue are wrong. Some companies are better than others, but all of them kind of give these single estimates, which are very precise but very inaccurate. And so we focus on giving something more like a weather report for a project or a company, where you have a certain percentage of success, a range of projected outcomes, and a most likely outcome.
How do you do that? Because isn't innovation actually coming from crazy bets, like things where the odds are stacked against
Sure.
you, high risk, low likelihood of achievement, but high reward?
but that's fine, right? You can have a 1% chance of creating a $1 billion company or $1 billion product line.
Mhm.
And that might be a bet that you want to take. Right. So in your portfolio, whether that's your personal portfolio or your corporate portfolio, you're probably going to have some bets which are, fairly reasonable, like a line extension. Like I have chocolate flavored ice cream. Now I'm going to have double chocolate flavored ice cream. Great. That's a pretty safe bet. Right? Or I'm going to do a brand extension with Doja Cat on my ice cream brand. Like that's fine. That's a pretty safe bet.
Mhm.
And then you're going to have some crazy ones. Like you're going to have something that's a little bit further out there, like durian flavored ice cream. Or you're going to have something completely insane, which is like melted ice cream at room temperature. Like we're going to sell that now. These are, perhaps silly ideas that won't work at all, but they are. But it's a portfolio of approaches where you have some safe, you have some moderate risk, you have some high risk. And if the high risk projects are potentially high reward but extremely low likelihood of success, that's absolutely fine. You just need to have enough bets on the table that at least one of those $1 billion bets will hopefully hit, right? Or at least will be managed by some of your moderate or safe bets.
I like that a lot. It's fine, but then you need to be clear on what are the odds and make the right
Yes,
decision based on this. Totally makes sense. So,
yes, exactly.
what has worked for you specifically, Tristan, to market and brand this service, right? Because I feel there is lots of complexity in the avatar, the ICP, like potentially multiple stakeholders, multiple decision makers, multiple people you need the buy-in from. So now that we have a good understanding of like what you do, can you break down for us what has worked for you to make people problem aware, solution aware, and start getting them into your funnel? We're not talking about closing yet, just like marketing, brand wise, what has worked for you?
So I would say this is still a relatively new value proposition for us. So I'm not going to claim to 100% nail it every single time.
Mhm.
What I will tell you is that um, we have had a strong enough reputation in the innovation space over the past, 13 years almost, that if you are a VP of innovation or you study innovation or you're an accelerator manager, you will have likely come across our material at some point. I took the lead of Alexander Osterwalder, who published an open source business model canvas, and he made that freely available for the world. And so again, I was working in Silicon Valley for many, many years, and that open source ethos of giving away some valuable work in order to attract people to a cause or attract people to your brand, that ethos very much appeals to me, kind of as a software engineer, as a hacker. So over the past 13 years, we've developed a huge number of templates and approaches and PowerPoint presentations and so on and so forth, which we've essentially given away as freemium content from our website. And that has been a strong brand builder for us. So um, very often, again, if you're in one of those roles where you're a head of product or a VP of innovation, it's quite likely you will have come across some of our material and you might recognize our brand. Okay, so we use that in a very typical freemium fashion. We allow people to download it for free, but they sign up to our website. They're allowed to remix and reuse it as long as they credit us. And from that, we build up our mailing list and we basically focus on reminding people that we exist, right? Because our service offerings, since we have been focused on innovation largely, is very timely, right? So it's not something where you walk down the street and you're thinking like all the time, like, oh, I need to innovate, I need to innovate, I need to innovate. It's something where everybody's innovating all the time in their companies. But when you have a problem, we need to be top of mind, right? So we need to remind people that we exist. So having a weekly newsletter, having a regular blog, which I have not been great about for the past year, but having regular thought leadership pieces, giving regular speeches so that when people have that problem, they think of you, That's always been the most successful tactic that we've had. And I think that's probably becoming more challenging now with the just deluge of AI garbage that's out there. But still, um, uh, perhaps fortunately, AI generated content tends to veer towards the mediocre and average by design. LLMs are designed to give you the average response. So even if it's well prompted, you're probably not going to get something that's really at the top of the game.
What's your strategy to get above and beyond the noise that everybody makes with AI? Like, what do you feel? Since you also got your first deal from that, right? I feel you've been quite successful at making it through the noise, getting the right people to find you at the right time. So, what's your strategy to stand out in this sea of noise, mainly generated by all the experts on LinkedIn now on all the topics, thanks to AI?
Um, I can't say that I have a brilliant strategy. I think my strategy is very often to say no, and don't try and target everyone, and don't try and appear as an expert to everything. Um, Again, I'm focused in the innovation industry, so it's perhaps a little bit different than some areas of other areas of consulting, right? If you come up to anybody who knows anything in innovation and say that you know the answers, you're going to trigger everybody's BS detector, right? Because the whole point of innovation is nobody knows perfectly what's going to happen. Right? Nobody knows everything. Like, do you know that this new project is going to be $1 billion? Well, if you did, then you as a consultant would be doing it. You wouldn't be helping somebody else do it. So that's clearly stupid. So I think the kind of typical, you've just come out of MBA school and you read the book The Lean Startup and you read some Porter and whatever, Porter Five Forces, and now you know everything because you've got ChatGPT and you're just going to use it to help you write proposals and things like that. Um, um, the AI generated slop largely comes off as a mediocre McKinsey consultant, right? Where it pretends to know everything and like is just dumping garbage on you. Not to be overly rude to McKinsey, like they've got some very good people there, but
I love you
like
guys. Don't worry.
you guys don't worry. But there's just this garbage of like this image of the consultant who comes in and pretends to know everything, and then gives you a PowerPoint and then runs out the door before they have to face the consequences, right? That's the stereotypical consultant as far as most people are concerned. So I think coming in and being able to admit what you know and what you don't know, again, be honest about what's going on, be honest about how you would learn the right answer, how you would experiment and iterate your way to success in a specific area. These are the things that ring true and hold true and are authentic. And that's something that AI doesn't do well. It doesn't admit what it doesn't know. So if you're competing against the people who are using AI and are just kind of reading off out of the textbook and trying to pretend that like they have a lot of experience, having credibility, having a track record, of working with many brands over many years, and being able to admit what you know and what you don't know, is itself a powerful way to cut through the BS.
No, you're putting the finger on something that I like a lot here, which is it's not only about showcasing expertise anymore. You still need to showcase expertise, I think, the one that you have, obviously, but it's also about showcasing frameworks, methods, things that you do and how you learn about a new topic and become bloody effective at it very quickly. But like showcasing that thought process and that framework more than just, hey, I know this. I like it.
Yeah,
And I think,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. A methodology, but I'd also say partly culture.
Right? Yeah,
Mm.
you're right.
I think my colleague Nick Norenya pointed this out about our company. His framing of it is he said that people purchase Kromatic because of our culture. not because of any specific thing. They like the way that we do things, which I think is very much what you're saying, methodology, framework, right? But when we say methodology or framework, people just think like, oh, they're purchasing you because you have a 5-box chart on a piece of paper that you're going to fill out during your consulting engagement, and that's not it. It's the way that you approach things, the gravity or the levity that you bring to a situation where you can come into an uncomfortable situation where people are afraid for their jobs, kind of concerned about the future, don't know how to handle the C-suite, don't know how to make their business case for their innovation project. And you can come in and say like, okay, we don't know the answers, but here's how we're going to handle it. And we're going to handle it together as a team. Um, and that is also, I think, very, very compelling. The culture and the way that you go about doing things.
That does make a lot of sense. How do you go from that though, Tristan? From that problem awareness, solution awareness, people have a good feel of like how you work, what you do, the expertise that you have. How do you move from that to an SOW, a letter of engagement, and we rock and roll? Can you walk us through your sales motion, like what you do that moves the needle and gets people from aware to engage with you?
So I don't think I don't think I would say anything that you haven't heard before, frankly. Like I'm very much in the school of, I read all the Neil Rackham books back in the day and things like that. Um, the one thing I will say is that all of the kind of standard stuff is true. You have your champions or evangelists. Those are the people that are responsible for bringing you into they are the ones with the strong problem awareness and an understanding of the company who want to bring you in, right? But those are very often different from the economic buyer who needs to sign that check. It's very, very different from the detail buyer, or sometimes called technical buyer, who might veto you, right?
Yeah.
So understanding those different roles in a large organization is absolutely critical. You do need to be able to navigate it. But I will say the one thing that I think Kromatic has perhaps done well, but perhaps also is not something that others want to follow, is say no, right? And ignore certain gigs. There are a lot of gigs that we've uh, been approached about where we said, you know what, this is actually not a very good gig for us, or it seems like you're fishing for consultants instead of coming with a specific problem that you want to solve. And we always try and be helpful when somebody contacts us. But if somebody contacts us and says like, oh, we want to know about this problem, or sorry, we want to know about your company, and can you send us a list of your offerings? This is kind of the sort of call that immediately I know that like, we don't want to spend too much time on this because they don't have a specific problem they're trying to solve, right? So I know that our reputation, at least in the innovation space, is we're not the top tier, right? We're not Alexander Osterwalder. I'm not Ash Maurya. I'm not Eric Ries. We're not super, super famous. But we're very well known, especially by all the other consultants, right? So when the other consultants get stuck, they usually call us in. So we tend to be the people that come in like after the big name comes and does the workshop, and they're like, well, we did the big workshop and we learned about this canvas and that canvas, but it's not working. What do we do? Right? We've been very good about kind of coming in with our feet on the ground and saying, this is how you actually implement this approach. So understanding that reputation and that brand of where we sit and being able to say like, well, it sounds like what you want is somebody really, really famous to come and convince your CEO that this is the right approach. Maybe that's not me. For some companies, maybe it is, but maybe in this situation, that's not me. Let me give you Eric's phone number, right? Or go call Alex. So being able to disqualify leads early, I think, is very key. And we disqualify 60% of the leads that come in almost immediately. So our
What do you
close
do to do
rate.
that, Tristan? What do you do to do that? How do you disqualify 60% of people without losing too much time, but at the same time without losing too many opportunities that could have become engagements? What's your process to dequalify?
We probably lose a lot of those opportunities that could become engagements, but they might come back some years later because again, we were honest with them. So again, typically, this could be an email conversation. It could be an over the phone conversation. I typically do not shy away from having phone conversations because I usually learn something about the state of the industry when that happens. So a sales call is a conversation. You should be learning as well as pitching your services. So in that conversation, we will try and be as helpful as possible. But very often that turns out to be referring the gig to somebody else who we think is maybe more qualified. And we look for three things when we get on a call. We want to have two or three things as our qualification criteria. So we have to either be speaking directly to the economic buyer, there has to be a budget already allocated, or there has to be a specific timeline allocated. Right, so like we need this by August. Right, so if it has two of those three things, it's qualified. If it has only one of those three things, it's not qualified. Right, so if it's a high-level CEO, but there's no urgency, there's no timeline, and there's no specific budget they've allocated, then it's not qualified. And we say like, well, look, I'm happy to talk to you, happy to give you some suggestions, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not something I'm going to put a lot of effort into follow up on. I'm just going to try and be as helpful as possible in that call, and hopefully they'll come back to us later with something more specific. So that's our qualification criteria. And I asked that, just to be clear, I asked those questions directly. Do you have a budget for this? Do you have a timeline for this? I think a lot of junior or new, let's not say junior, new consultants are sometimes afraid to ask about the money or specific questions. And I think it's, again, the best policy just to be very straightforward and say, like, do you have a budget? What is your budget? I don't care if it's $1 or $1 million. If it's $1 million, again, I can give you Eric Reese's contact information. You can ask him to come give a speech for $1 million. If it's $10, I can recommend a good book for you to read. But I will try and help whoever for whatever budget they have. And I just try and ask them to be honest with me, and I try and be honest with them.
Funny, that's a discussion I have with a lot of members of the mastermind that I host. And what I recommend is, once you've solved the lead gen and the funnel issue, right? Because if you're not speaking to anybody, if nobody wants to speak to you in the first place, you want to get on the phone, you want to understand where you can help. So like
Yes.
This assumes that your business is at a certain level already. But I'm thinking of someone right now who was like getting 80% unqualified calls. And I was like, how many questions do you ask before they book a call? I was like, what do you mean? Their email address. I was like, right. Let's look at the funnel here and let's ask a few qualifying questions, right? What's your budget? What's your yearly revenues? Where would you like to be? Depending on what the goal of the company is, of course. But like adding good friction to a funnel is rarely a bad thing. And the best part is you can remove it back. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can remove those questions if you see that there is too much friction. But not being afraid of asking for the money, ballpark ID, we're not asking them to marry us just yet. Adding good friction is usually a super good thing for B2B coaching and consulting. Once you get to
100%.
Go ahead. Nice. Thanks, Tristan. Once you start working with those people, a big part of one of the things the partner at PwC taught me is that there are two types of consultants. There are the hunters and the farmers. That's him saying. He was like, I'm a hunter. I love the smell of fresh blood in the morning. I love to go after new business. And he was like, but the partners growing the fastest, the ones making the most money, are actually the farmers. The ones who are able to take that initial engagement, over-deliver, and transform it into a multi-layered, multi-year projects involving other teams and like other verticals within the firm, because they've identified other problems that we can help solve for the clients. Like, those are the ones who make the most money. How do you farm, Tristan?
Can I take an aside for a second? What I really appreciate about your colleague there is that he knows what he wants, or she knows what she wants.
Indeed.
I really appreciate that I appreciate setting goals before you go out and just try and build a business, right? And understanding what it is that satisfies you and that's going to bring you joy or bring you the rewards that you want, whether that's monetary or whether that's extraordinary challenges. I think that's extremely important. So understanding that, oh, the better way to do this is to farm, but I like to hunt, so I'm going to go hunt. I really appreciate because there are many times we've there was a client that we had to that we worked with briefly, and then we turned down due to some ethical concerns that basically was going to kill our company if we turned it down.
Interesting risk.
It wasn't even a risk; it was a certainty. It was like this is our one client. I run a boutique consultancy, so when you have one client that's dominating your entire business for a couple of years in a row, and you decide to turn it off, it's going to crush your business, and you're going to have to fire people, right? But there's a point at which you have to decide, what do I want to do? And I think a lot of people don't consciously make that choice, and they sort of wing it, and they can wind up doing some things which either are ethically questionable or they just don't like, and brings them unhappiness, which will eventually, of course, also hurt your bottom line. If you're not happy as a consultant doing what you're doing, you're eventually going to annoy your clients, and you're going to lose them eventually anyway. So I just really appreciate that point about understanding what it is that you're good at, and what brings you joy, and focusing on that. That said, again, to try and answer your question about farming, again, I do try and keep in contact with people that I like to work with, that we've worked with before. I'm not the best person at kind of networking my way through the organization to get to the top and expand a small gig to a giant thing. I like to focus on the things that challenge me and that I enjoy. We've done global transformation projects. Again, we've turned down some global transformation projects. And I know that the way that you can grow some business is sometimes maybe not the best for you and your team. And like, I know the way to make more money, or the way that we certainly could have made a lot more money in the past would have been to create a single workshop and do that workshop again and again and again and again and again in every single department and every single person for this company and for other companies. Unfortunately, that absolutely bores me to tears. Right. So number one, I don't want to do it.
You know what
Like
you want.
I don't mind doing the same workshop a few times, but I don't want to do the same thing every day for like 3 years in a row. Secondly, I don't think it's good for the client, right? If you're doing the same training for 3 years in a row, you have failed to teach them how to fish, right? Like, we want to do the same workshop with that person and then train somebody in the organization to do that, right? We should be doing train the trainer. So that's our approach. And I want to frankly say to anybody who's listening, that is not a good economic approach, right? It is probably the way to make you less money, but it is a good way to maintain your integrity and reputation and actually have a good impact. So that's our approach. It's not necessarily the smartest thing to do in the world.
Respect that. I respect that a lot. I think people who are after the long-term games win. It just takes longer, but they win.
It just takes longer, and it's a different way to win, right? So, I mean, I know, I'm sure there are many of my colleagues who make a lot more money than I do, and yada yada yada. But I've had the opportunity to work for the Department of Defense. I've had the opportunity to work with. I've been on the ice cream board of innovation at Unilever. I've worked with accelerators around the world. I've worked with mining companies and energy companies. I've talked to the Austrian Forestry Service about how to innovate with trees. And this is something that I find extremely rewarding. And so I would absolutely urge anybody who's in the consulting practice to think about what really matters to you. Why are you doing consulting? Are you just trying to get a paycheck? That's absolutely fine. I respect that as well. If you just want to make money and you want to be 7-figure consultant, 8-figure consultant, fine, no problem. but think about what actually you want, and where is the balance between having a sustainable business and having something that drives you forward intellectually, emotionally. Are you having the right impact? Are you saying yes to the right types of gigs, which maybe don't pay that much, but have the type of impact that you want to have in the world? And saying no to things that are going to be soul crushingly dreary and tedious. It's an important distinction. It's important to know what you like, and it's important to have the type of impact that you want to have in the world.
Amen to that. Tristan, there is one question that I ask all of my guests, and that I'm quite curious to ask you actually. Because I feel you bring a lot of nuance to all the aspects of your business, and which is probably why you've been doing it for so long and why you've probably been successful at it. What's your challenge right now? What is the nut that you're trying to crack that if you crack will, I'm not going to use the term skyrocket your growth because you're playing the long-term game, but that will allow you to take on the next step and the next level and so on. What's the challenge that you're trying to solve for?
I'm trying to productize the method that we've been using for, some people might call innovation accounting, or it might just be how to predict innovation outcomes. So the biggest challenge for us is that there is a methodology to do this. It's not something that we personally invented, but there is, using Monte Carlo simulations, you can predict a range of outcomes in an uncertain environment, right? That's a mathematical technique for operating under uncertainty with numbers. And the tools to do that are terrible because they're mostly Excel. And Excel is very slow at this sort of thing. It's just not built well for it. So we used to teach a course on how to apply this approach to predicting innovation outcomes. And it was a 6-week course. And it involved training, it involved practice. And what we discovered is that basically people don't want to do the practice. The tools were slow and tedious to use. Our 12-page Excel template, which was a monster. And so there are just certain technical obstacles to actually implementing that methodology. And that was the biggest hurdle in this area. And so our challenge right now is building a tool that makes that easier for people. So we've actually been working on that at Krobar.ai. That's Krobar.ai, which is a tool to turn what used to be a 6-week course and sometimes a multi-month process into something that takes minutes with a sophisticated Monte Carlo simulation engine in the back and an AI to help you build it. So that's our challenge right now, is to try and take all that knowledge and all that approach and use technology to enable people to work better. And I do want to emphasize, not make an AI tool that's supposed to predict it without humans, but to kind of make a partner that will help you take that human judgment and turn it into something quantifiable. So tooling and building and
Amazing, I think is the right word. And it's so funny because in the era of AI, this is both something you want to do, but also something that will maybe put you next to everybody else versus your own expertise as a human. So I think it's important to have both, which is what you're doing, which is the right move in my opinion.
Well, that's kind of brings us back to trust, right? One of the biggest problems with AI is that you can't always know when to trust it and when not to. And I think I do work in innovation, so I work in product development. So I think one of the big user experience challenges of the next few years is how to not just default to a chatbot interface with AI, but to understand how to make the AI a trustworthy coworker, and what are the interfaces and experiences that you need to have in order to make that something people actually want to do, that some people accept, and that people ultimately trust that the AI is not going to lead them astray. And so that's absolutely critical, to teach people to create an experience where you want to work with the AI, And you don't just fall into this habit of letting the AI do the work for you badly.
Tristan Kromer, ladies and gentlemen. Tristan, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
You can absolutely go to Krobar.ai. That's Krobar.ai, or you can visit our consulting website at Kromatic.com. That's Kromatic.com. Or LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn. You can Google us.
We'll put all the links in the description. I can say one thing for sure, Tristan, is that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview.
Great.
I
Thank you
decided to.
very much, Guillaume. It's a pleasure. Excellent questions. And thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much, man. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.